Hello and welcome to my session 9 video assignment about our WACC, which is our weighted average cost of capital assignment, and we'll talk about it here. So I'm just going to walk us through what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about a hypothetical investment decision for Netflix, and we're going to start with our define and discover of the driver framework. Start with define and discover, go down to represent. We're going to implement that using some simple Python code, then validate that with it, and then we're going to evolve this, take it one step further, and then finally just reflect on some stuff. So let's start out with our define and discover. We have our information that we need to first define, and that is this hypothetical situation that Netflix has encountered. Is their market capitalization is $200 billion. Their total debt right now is $14 billion. Their debt market value is $13 billion. Equity beta is 1.3, so it's not the most volatile thing ever, but it is slightly. The bond rating is a B plus, pretty much is what that means. And the corporate tax rate is 21%, and the current stock price is 450, which it's a lot higher in real life, but that's the hypothetical. And then just some market conditions that we kind of need to touch over is that the risk-free rate, so if you put money in the treasury, you'll get 4.5%. The market risk premium is 5.5, and then the media industry's WACC range is 8 to 10. So we'll get into what it actually is and if Netflix is inside of that. And then just for some context, because we're going to be having some questions over Disney and Amazon, Disney has a 70% equity and 30% debt with a WACC of 8.2%, and Prime Video has a WACC of 9.5%. So they're in that industry range. And then Netflix is considering $3 billion additional debt for the for the investment. So now we're kind of into the discover part of the define and discover. We're going to talk about some questions that need to be answered, like calculating its current WACC, determine what the WACC is before and after the $3 billion debt, and then we're going to evaluate some project-specific stuff with if it's going to be an international or a in-states kind of thing. And then we're going to compare Netflix to Disney, and then we're going to recommend the structure strategy. So basically if they should take the debt or not. So just some important formulas to note is the CAPM, which we talked about, and the WACC. So to represent, we needed to get the formulas for those. So we have those right here. And then now we have the formulas and the variables. We needed to put that into a Python code. So for my represent, I show my prompt to the Gemini that helped me. So after giving it all the information, I said, could you make a Python code calculating the WACC given the information that I've given you? And we use the keep it simple stupid principles, the KISS principles that Professor Zhang talks about in class. And we needed help with the questions that we just read off. And then in a perfect world, the code you write would answer all these questions all at once. So for implement, we have our Google Colab open. Gemini spit out a code for us, and we went through, looked at the variables and their match up. So we're good to move on. And so now just the implement part with the analysis of it. We have our cost of equity being 11.65, and our current Netflix WACC is 11.22. So it is a little bit above that industry rating, which isn't the best thing because you need a higher rate of return to even follow through with the project. But our new WACC after we get the debt would be 11.13%, which is because that tax shield. In class, we talked about what a tax shield is. It's when you take on tax, and the IRS basically is like, oh, you have tax, so you don't have to pay this certain amount for that. And then our WAC for US is the 11.22, but our international one is 13.22%, probably because it is a little bit more risky to go international. And then the competitor comparison that we were talking about, it's Netflix's 11.22 versus Disney's 8.22, and Netflix has a 3% higher WAC, and we need to know why this is, and it's probably because Disney has more debt, and then their beta is less volatile. So we want to issue the debt for Netflix, but we do see that Disney has a better WAC than Netflix because it has more debt and it's able to get more of a tax shield. So now, now that we've answered the questions and seen the code, we go down to our validate stage, which we have the questions up, and we basically just go through what we just talked about, and all of it matches up. We answered the questions, so it does make sense. More debt means a lower WAC because you need less of a return rate. And so to evolve this, I asked the Gemini to make me a code that could talk about maybe what if the federal rates rose or anything like that, or if people value Netflix or any of these providers differently. So I have this insight right here, but I'll show you this code first. It has this nice piece of information right here. So the first insight shows how the WAC change. How would the WAC change if the Fed rate rises or the beta rises, which means Netflix becomes riskier. So the riskier it becomes, and the riskier it becomes, and the more the Fed rate rises, we see in the bottom right 15.68%. We see that the WAC increases. So it's a bad thing if federal rates rise and Netflix becomes risky. So our second insight is that it shows what the perfect amount of debt would be to where they're not just taking on unnecessary debt. So we want to look at the one with the lowest WAC, which would be an additional $50 billion in debt with a 1.4 beta. That gets us a 10.38% WAC, which is the lowest of the WACs given to us, and it does have the most savings. So finally, for our insight number 3, it shows the shareholder value and how it's created by the lower WAC. So basically, the firm value's current WAC is $53.48 billion, and its optimized would be $54.45 billion. And it created almost $1 billion in value for the shareholders if we were to take on this extra amount of debt. So I thought that was very interesting. And finally, just to reflect upon all of this, I didn't realize international projects would increase the WAC, and I guess they don't always have to, but it's more than likely going to be that way. And then we learned in class, Professor Zhang told us about Peter Lynch and his philosophy. We did learn that debt is a good thing. It's a dual-edged sword. You can either use it as a shield, or you can use it to get in debt and to then you go bankrupt. So if you use debt in the positive ways like we talked about in class, such as the tax shield, you're taking on more debt so you get more of a break. That is a good way. You want to invest in assets, not invest in stuff that's unneeded or like a liability. And then finally, Disney's debt did pay off in the long run. I didn't expect that. Initially looking at it, you think debt's a bad thing, but debt is not always a bad thing. And I think that's what we've really needed to hit home, and that if you have a little bit more debt, not too much, but if you have the right amount of debt, you can lower that WAC, which then lowers the required rate of return needed. So I think overall, I would just really want to emphasize that debt can be a good thing. It's not hard to grasp grasp your head around that concept once you've learned the stuff like we have in class. So I thank you for your time and thank you for listening.